Welcome everyone to the Voices of Genius, the dawn of your new story. And I'm excited to be here with all of you and our special guest today. Welcome, Kymberlee Weil.
Thank you, Adam. It's such a pleasure to be here today.
Yes. Well, let's see where we go. We'll have some fun and we'll dive deep into storytelling, story showing, and a whole lot more.
All right.
So I think we should also talk maybe a little bit, not just about your story, but the story we're telling ourselves and our collective story and how we share our stories and where we share our stories from. And as I was, Kymberlee, as I was kind of leaning a little bit into, what do we want to explore today? Where do we want to go? I was sitting quietly over here in my garden, just kind of listening to that. And in came this story of my life's journey when I originally started in the real estate industry. Some ungodly 3 or 4 decades ago, actually, a long time ago. And I go, well, where'd that come from? And this story was really fascinating because I was a bit of a neophyte in LA, wondering, well, where am I going to go in my life? What am I really interested in? And so I got hooked up with this job in real estate. And I'll never forget the first day on the job, I met, my boss was there to greet me, and his name was Bob. And Bob was like a Marine sergeant. And I'll never forget what he told me. He goes, Paul, I want you here at 8:00 every day, and do not come back to the office until the sun sets. And he says to me, and furthermore, if you don't have holes in your shoes, don't come back at all. In other words, go pound the pavement. And get out there and knock on doors and go for it. That was my training. Just put me out there. And here I was, a young man of about 22 years old. And it was in the downtown Los Angeles. And it was a big cement jungle, so to speak. And I was a little bit out of my element, to be honest with you, because I was living out at the beach out in Malibu. And he said, and he told me this story to kind of kick off the journey, which was the story of the law of the jungle, which goes, when the sun comes up, whether you're the lion or the gazelle, you better run like hell, eat or be eaten. Well, I wasn't about to be eaten. So I got out there and it was, of course, it was all about the mighty dollar. It was all about how much money you can make for the company and whatnot. And I don't know if you remember, and some of you may, but back in the mid 90s, there was a movie called Jerry Maguire. Sure. It was about this Hollywood agent. And there was this line that all I could think about was, show me the money. And when I heard that line, as I was reflecting on today, I also heard something very important about storytelling, because storytelling is not just about telling your story. It's about showing your story and really bringing it alive for your audience. So I look forward to talking a little bit about telling and showing your story with our guest today, Kymberlee Weil, who, by the way, is NCAA Woman of the Year, a 4th degree master level black belt, author of 2 books in technology. That's interesting. And founder of an award-winning software company. Kymberlee is a winner of both the Association for Women in Communications Achievement Award and the Spirit of Entrepreneurship for Professional Services. She's a trainer of hundreds of TEDx speakers, improv, comedian, performer, and instructor, international speaker, and creator of the storytellingschool.com, specializing in high-stakes short-form storytelling to help leaders and thought leaders alike expand their influence. Well, there's so much more I could share about Kymberlee. So I want to invite everybody to go check out her website at storytellingschool.com. So, Kymberlee, what's your story?
Right? Let's see. In my billions of stories, which one to tell you now? Well, in your opening story, this concept of show versus tell, for all of us as storytellers, if you think about it, when you consume a story, if someone is talking at you and telling you, okay, this happened, this other thing happened, this other thing happened, maybe your long-winded uncle comes to mind, right? This type of storyteller where it's just fact after fact after fact. We tend to zone out. We tend to sort of, our minds wander. We may be smiling, but our mind can be wandering. But to your point, when we can show versus tell, we can give our audience this experience, a feeling. Then not only do they connect to the story on a much deeper level, they connect to us as the storyteller on a deeper level. And that's how we build trust, because we are creating that almost co-creation of an experience together. So I'm feeling what you're saying, you're feeling what I'm saying. And there's this delicious place within storytelling, Adam, that you well know, that, we are having an experience together. And from a human perspective, there's not much else as powerful as having an experience with another human. And that's what storytelling can do.
Yeah, powerful. And I want to roll with that a little bit more, but I'm a little curious about you and this NCAA Woman of the Year. What was that? What was that all about?
Oh, darling, that was so long ago. So that was, I grew up as an athlete from little baby girl all the way up through college. And my sport was fast pitch softball. I was a softball pitcher, and I received a full ride scholarship to pitch for the University of Hawaii. And so that NCAA Woman of the Year award was presented when I was attending the University of Hawaii, and it was based on, all our grades, yes, and our collegiate sport abilities as well. So it was an incredible honor to have received that.
Well, I bet you threw a mean fastball.
My pitch was an inside curveball, because just like a plot twist in a story, I love to keep the batters sort of off balance and guessing what would come next. So my best pitch, the batter would be there and would be ready. And my curveball would come in and break right at the batter. So the batter would be ready to go and would have to almost back up, because the pitch would come inside and usually land for a strike. So it was my kind of go-to secret weapon, that inside curveball, because the way that I spun the ball, it would break right at the last minute.
Ooh, that sounds pretty like a wicked curveball there.
It was pretty wicked. It was wicked. Yes.
Let's go back to story, because you mentioned something that I think really resonates. And I think it's maybe really key right now, not only in storytelling, but maybe just in relationships and life and sharing and being out in the world. And that's the word trust. Mm-hmm. And in establishing that trust and that relationship with your audience. So what are some of the other key elements of, really good or great storytelling and great story showing?
Well, what I would say, Adam, storytelling is the fastest way to build trust between two humans. There's no faster way to build trust, because when I meet someone, I may not know them. I may not know about them. I mean, you hear that saying, know, like, and trust factor, right? And so storytelling collapses time in that know, like, and trust factor. So if you tell me a story, even a vulnerable story, a story that was very personal, very real, very true, a time where you overcame a huge obstacle, or a time where you made a big mistake, by you sharing that story with me, all of a sudden I can't help but trust you because you're sharing something very deep and personal and real. And so with that, I want to reciprocate that and be connected to you, feel connected to you, trust you because you're willing to do that. So I'm willing to then ideally share a story back of something that's really deep and true and real, so that that bond can happen very, very fast through storytelling. And to your question, I would say some of the other elements that are important in storytelling, there are so many. And as you say, story showing, right, is to relive your own experiences as you're telling the story. Here's what I mean by that. When we tell a story about something that happened in our past, a lot of times we feel like there's a distance to that telling of the story. So for example, I'm telling a story of something that happened in my childhood. It happened then. I'm telling that story in past tense. There it was, this happened. But instead, if I relive that story, and I take you into a moment in time and tell that story in present tense as it's happening, not only will you feel like a character inside of that story, you are reliving it with me. And so when I have a story that I tell about a ridiculous time on the mound as a softball pitcher. I have many, many stories of me on the mound as a softball pitcher, but this particular story has to do with my dad as the coach. And I don't tell you this story in this fact, this fact, this fact. Instead, I take you into that moment in time. And there I was on the mound, and the cheers are going on here. And, you know, the other relief pitchers are warming up there, but I'm in that moment in present tense. So I would say, as a storyteller and shower, the more that we can tell our stories in present tense and take our audience into that moment in time with us, that is powerful storytelling.
Well, I've noticed that amongst all great stories that I've listened to as well, or tuned into visually as well, whether it's just pure storytelling, say on a screen, or somebody standing there storytelling.
Sure.
I think that is a core piece, is like you shared, enlivening that story in real time, so that your audience is there with you. They're living
Yes.
that story as well. And I want to go a little kind of further with that, if it's cool, to get in kind of the art of that enlivening, that process of really bringing it to life. And would you say that story could be told both from, say, told and shown from the heart, told and shown from just a gut visceral feel? Or maybe it's more storytelling that's more, say, in the head, or a little more linear. I mean, the body is the instrument. The body is the vehicle. You know, how can people share their story, or their brand story, of course, through enlivening where they share their story from? Does that make sense?
It does, Adam. And what a beautiful point you bring up, because when we tell our stories from our head only, there is going to be a feeling perhaps of sterileness. So it's going to be sort of a sterile story. And I'm going back to this happened, this other thing happened. Then I did this, and then I said that, and then she said that. And that isn't very exciting to listen to, for sure. And frankly, it's not very exciting to tell either. So from the storyteller point of view, or the story viewer, feeler point of view, there's, again, the best way I could describe it is that sterileness. When instead, if you do speak from the heart, we want to know in your storytelling, how did you feel? How were you feeling about what just happened? You know, something in every story, something happens. So how do you feel from your heart, from your gut? Were you, when you're in that portion of the story where you talk about the conflict or the struggle in a particular story, allow us to know what your emotions are. And you can verbally say, you know, I was so scared, I didn't know what to do. Or you can say, all of a sudden I feel sweat running down my back and my fingers go numb. And I can't even move my feet, right? So that's so different with, from describing that feeling of what's going on in your body versus I was scared.
Well, speaking of scared, I'll raise my hand a little bit on my own fear around storytelling, and still the sense of just sharing a little bit. It's this that I'm a little more settled these days as I emerge more into sharing and showing and sharing story. But I would imagine, I think you probably find this with your students or your clients in storytelling school, that that fear is overwhelming. I mean, it can be debilitating, as a matter of fact. And, whether it's a fear of, humiliation or an inadequacy, or I'm not worthy, whatever it is, what is kind of a couple methods or practices? How can an everyday storyteller, get through that fear and that sense like, oh my God, I'm going to die out there kind of thing, right?
Yes. Well, I love this topic because this is one of my most asked and requested topics. So let's start here. Statistically speaking, the probability of you dying while telling a story is very low. So know that. So that's good. The odds are in our favor that chances are we are not going to perish in the middle of a story. That's good. The next piece of this puzzle is to understand what fear means. And usually fear simply means you care. That's it. You're feeling fear because you really care what the audience thinks. You really care if this story lands. You really care if this is funny. You really care if this hits a chord or strikes a nerve or touches someone's heart. And so knowing it's simply that you care. I'm glad that most people I work with feel fear because that means that you're alive and that you care. So knowing that, great, we know that. So next is to what I call redirect your focus. And when we redirect our focus outward instead of inward, that is one of the most powerful tools against fear. And so here's what it can look like. For a lot of speakers that I work with, particularly getting ready for high stakes stages, like a TEDx stage. I had one speaker I worked with a couple of years ago, and I was backstage with him. He was ready to go on. And he was hyperventilating backstage because he was so nervous about his talk. Yet he had an idea which was absolutely worth spreading on a TEDx stage. So a tremendous and powerful idea. And so we went through some breathing techniques and I refocused him. And what I told him and what I tell many people is, at this point, it's not about you. It's about your audience. And what that means is a lot of times as speakers, I'm guilty of it too. Performers, I'm guilty of it too. In improv and everything I do these days on stages, I feel nervous. I feel that fear. And what I catch myself doing is I'm thinking internally. I'm thinking of, how am I doing? How's my hair? Are they going to, be bored with this? Are they going to laugh when I want them to laugh? Are they going to get that joke? Are they going to understand this lesson? And that is all me. And instead, a more effective way is to focus outward and say, what does the audience need? How can I serve them? If my eyelashes are not on point, that's okay. It's not about me. It's about them. Do they need to have a different point of view on a particular topic? Do they need to understand something that's vitally important for their life's work? Do they need a little bit of humor right now? What do they need? How can I serve them? And when you refocus that fear outwards to how can I serve? What do they need? Everything changes. And so you're no longer focused on, am I going to screw up? Am I going to drop that line, that paragraph? And what do they need? How can I connect? What can I give them? And that alone can be a game changer for everyone, not only as a storyteller, but as a presenter, as a speaker, as a thought leader in general.
Well, you nailed it. That is a game changer, in my opinion. How can you serve your audience? And what a nice way to kind of go from fear, and the whole idea is to really, begin to feel, well, I really want a great outcome for my audience. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm nervous about. I want to see them have, well, maybe a transformation, maybe a shift. Sure. Maybe just a simple laugh about themselves and about life in some way. So I love that, because you take it evolves the idea of fear, and to say, well, what is it that you love here? And what you love is what the outcome for the audience. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I often remind myself when I'm sharing or speaking, or even just creating a video or something like that, was, my objective here, as when I'm talking to myself, is I want that audience to feel better about themselves and more in love with their life when I'm finished talking and sharing. So it's just in saying that, the fear just subsides. There you go. It just seems to come in, because there you have it. Of course, that's one of the great secrets of life is that better outcome for the audience. I did an interview, and it's in part of my interview series, with a wonderful woman named Lynn Twist. Mm-hmm. And she just published a book called The Committed Life. Mm-hmm. And the power of that one idea within yourself that's planted, nurtured, shared in your story and your sharing of that committed life is so liberating, is it not? Isn't it some way freeing to yourself and your audience?
100%. I think it's absolutely liberating. And I want to also touch on one thing that you said, Adam, I think a lot of people may gloss over. And that is having an intention behind every single time you speak. And I feel like what you just said is so important, because a lot of times we do just-in-time storytelling or just-in-time speaking. We write a great talk or a story, and we memorize it to the best of our ability, and then we hit the stage. But there's this other delicious kind of period of time that I call this mastery period, where it's between the time that you've already written your story, you've already memorized it, gotten it in your body, and now you can play with it and you can really expand it and test it and try different approaches to certain words and certain phrasing. But within this period of time, there's also setting an intention, which is, okay, I'm about to tell this story. Why? So I love to say to all my clients, story on purpose, story on purpose, story on purpose. Let's not randomly tell stories. Then you're back to your long-winded uncle kind of just rattling off about who knows what. But instead, we're story on purpose. So with story on purpose, you think, okay, here's my intention. I want my audience to see a point of view they've never seen before. I want them specifically, after I'm done telling this story, to turn to the person next to them and say XYZ. I want my audience to leave this room acting different, thinking different, right? So when we have intention behind our storytelling and behind our speaking in general, then we can drive towards those exact outcomes that we'd like to see. And I think that for you, and you already do this, I know, Adam, but for so many people listening, this may not have occurred to you before, to really set that intention. So words on a page are not enough, right? There's so much more to this delicious world of storytelling, and intention's a big part of it.
Well, absolutely. And we're taking the idea of an intention that's committed to serve the greater good, right, of the audience, so to speak.
Yes.
And I think just to underscore the importance of that storytelling wisdom that you just shared is, for everybody listening, sometimes and I know I've done this at times, at least early on, was, confusing a desired kind of thing versus an intentional kind of thing. So, when I'm sharing that, the idea of desire, well, that's a little more what's in it for me. What's that outcome for me standing on that TEDx stage versus, I'm in a clear intention. You as a master of arts in karate and other types of arts, that is an intention of clear focus. And it's very directed and very powerful. And I love this piece around committed intention of service, a greater outcome, and less so in the desired thing, which is a little weaker, and I think and maybe I'll just kind of ask you a little bit, in terms of crispness, if that's the right word here, or yes, the focus. So if your story is like an arrow flying to the bullseye, what is it that does that entail? Is that kind of a whole experience of body, mind, spirit, soul, energy? It's kind of the whole, what makes that quiver fly to the bullseye of where you want it to land with your committed intention for your audience?
Sure. I think several things come into play here. One is being true to who you are. So the more that you are in your own strength, power, retelling, reliving this story, the more the audience will connect with that. If I, for example, were to try to be someone I'm not, or if I'm not true to who I am and how I naturally talk, that arrow is going to not hit that target as much as I'd like it to. And so another teaching note that I will often give is write like you speak. In other words, when you're writing out your story, the more that you write like you speak, when you memorize it, when you get it in your body, it is going to be more true to you. So sometimes storytellers, when they're getting started telling stories, they'll use a lot of fancy language and terms that they may not normally say in a conversation. And from an audience perspective, that is a little bit of we're disconnected a little bit because we can feel that inauthenticity as it comes out. We can see, that word wasn't really something someone would normally say, or it doesn't feel right. And so first off, to use language that feels very natural, very conversational. So that's one. Then to your point, also embodying it, reliving it. When I relive one of my stories, I see where I am. I can see that environment, and that environment comes to life for me. And the audience is part of that environment. So using my earlier example, when I'm telling one of my stories about being on the softball mound, I know where the mound is. I know how big it is. I know where my catcher is. I know where the umpires are, my team, the other team. I have a full, I call it spatial awareness. So I have that really keen spatial awareness of I know where everything is. So when I'm sharing this experience with you and I'm making a gesture to one area or another area, you can see it too. And that helps that arrow hit that bullseye as well, because you can't help as an audience member but feel what I'm feeling in a well-told story. So I think it's being authentic to you and your style of storytelling, embodying where you are when that story was occurring. So taking it into present tense, into that moment in time, and then allowing the delicious details to come out. So sometimes we tend to go to the facts because our analytical brain will take over and we go to the facts, but instead to allow the audience to know, how are we feeling? What do we feel about what just happened? Igniting all of the senses if we can. We have all of the senses at our fingertips, at our disposal, that we can use that. What are you seeing? What are you feeling? What do you smell? What do you taste? What are you touching in that moment? And as we allow those senses to come through, that helps the audience re-experience it as well. So those are a couple of things that come to mind.
Yeah, no, it's really excellent, because I'm so with you in that authenticity and an integrity of story. And it's so easy to get in that linear place that seems a little bit more detached, right?
Right.
It's a little more ego type of thing at first, just being authentic. And sometimes I really like to emphasize, well, you can be authentic with your warts and your things that maybe just are part of life, because everybody has their stuff. And what does that do? Of course, establishes credibility, authenticity, establishes trust. Why, hey, she's just like me. I get it. So I think that you can't emphasize that enough to be, well, be real, be real in this sense. And, one of the things that I've kind of been focused a little bit on, some of the things I'm doing around storytelling is the outcome you want that audience to experience or feel, or at least activate within themselves as they step out the door or move forward, or they explore your brand more, whatever it is in your story. So the classic call to action, right? The call to action. And, I call it growing corn. How do you grow corn with your story? In other words, and I don't know if you've found this, but I have found this, that those powerful storytellers, those deep, authentic stories, they create movement, they create action, right? And in that action, it inspires, some motivate. Now that's a little different, but I'm talking inspires others to grow corn with their life. In other words, manifest life, manifest story, become more of a leader within your own business or whatever it be. And I was thinking about that a couple days ago. I'll share it with you and share it with everybody. I received an email from Thea. Thea sent me an email, and she had watched my free master's class, The Power of Your New Story to Create Influence and Impact. And she says, Adam, I have spent a lifetime trying to figure out the meaning of what my near-death experience and out-of-body experience meant to me. And I watched your master's class, and I was able to determine what it really meant. Now, I won't go on, but the point here is this storytelling that I was sharing landed on her in such a way that offered a transformation. It began to have her think and feel differently and remember something about her life, probably a healing in this particular instance. But don't you think that, when we think about story and where we want that story to land, and then the action, the call to action that we want someone to take, and isn't that a kind of also a key through line as somebody walks away? What do they do? Do they just feel good? Do they feel inspired? Well, that's fine too. Are they motivated because now they fear something is lacking or they're missing something? Or do they really take your story and evolve their lives and the lives of people around there, evolve their product or the people that work for them? What do you say about call to action and outcomes that you may want to intend with your story?
Sure. So there's a couple things here. One is I look at ways into a story from two different perspectives, either story first, lesson second, or lesson first, story second. And what I mean by that is sometimes we have a great story. Something happened in our life that is remarkable. We learned a lesson the hard way. Okay, great. That's a great story. So we know the story is good, but we don't know exactly where that lesson, that call to action can go. And so one story can have multiple different lessons attached to it at the end, multiple different calls to action at the end, depending on the audience you're in front of. So knowing your audience is critical. So knowing, again, story on purpose. What do I want them to do after hearing this story? Do I want them to be inspired to think differently? Do I want them to take a very specific action? So it goes back to intention that we were talking about earlier. So being very crystal clear on that. Or maybe you are lesson first, story second. So maybe you say, you know what, I really need to teach, Adam. Like maybe you're saying, I need to do a video on fear, because a lot of my clients, let's suppose, are coming to you and saying, Adam, help me overcome. I have fear around my storytelling. I don't know if anyone wants to hear it. I don't know, if they'll laugh at me. I have a lot of fear around that. So you're going to do a training on fear. So you know that your call to action, your lesson is going to have something to do with, overcoming fear in some way. So you can reverse engineer and say, all right, what story do I have in my story arsenal? I like to call it a story arsenal. I keep all my stories in one place so that if I ever need a story, I can just flip, story. So it's all story ideas. They're not fully developed stories, but story ideas. So it's one notebook. Everything goes in this one notebook. And I have it at my fingertips. And so I can flip through and say, okay, what story can set up that call to action as it relates to fear? Maybe you have an exercise that you want them to do, your audience to do, to help them overcome the fear. So you're going to have an exercise around fear. What story in your life was a time where you felt fear and got on the other side of it, or felt fear and didn't get on the other side of it? And it had a catastrophic event because you didn't take action in some way. And so either way in can drive towards that call to action. But there's a whole nother piece here to this. And I'll give you an example. So when we talked about my softball career. So my first semester at the University of Hawaii, like I'm on a full ride scholarship. Everything is amazing. And my roommate and I are cramming for finals. And it's about 9:00 at night. And she says, hey, Kymberlee, you want to go grab a bite to eat? I said, yeah, let's go to King's Bakery. I love their sweet Hawaiian bread French toast. So we hop on our mopeds. We go have a delicious bite to eat at King's Bakery. And then we head back to the dorm, wind in our hair. And that's the last thing I remember. I don't remember the screech of the tires on the cement truck as it ran the red light. I don't remember the shattered glass on the ground everywhere. And I certainly don't remember them having to cut my clothes off of me to find out where all the blood was coming from. What I do remember is waking up in the hospital 5 days later. Now, that story is a true story, a real story in my life. But our question, we can say, Kymberlee, why are you telling this story? What do you want this story to do? From that moment of waking up in the hospital, if I'm just telling a woe is me story, oh, I got hit by a cement truck and I ended up in the hospital, again, all true, it's real, that happened in my life. But where do we go from there? If I just tell that sad story about that, and waking up in the hospital, I'm going to leave the audience in a place of feeling sorry for me, despair, feeling uncomfortable, hearing about blood, right? So this is a really important area, I believe, for us as storytellers and sharers, that we have to be very careful with our audience's emotions, and notice that if you do tell a story of real hardship or something like an accident or a near-death experience, which many of us have had, decide how you can bring your audience out and beyond that. So that particular story for me, and I'm bringing this all together with the call to action, it's not about the accident. It's about what it took for me to make a decision to get back on that softball mound. The doctor said I would never, I'd have trouble with my balance for the rest of my life. The doctors said, I would have headaches for the rest of my life too. The doctor said all these negative things, but it was my decision. I'm going to get back on that softball mound. Softball is my life. This is everything I know. This is what I live for. I am an athlete. So I'm not going to listen to the doctors. I'm going to make my way back on that mound. And so I do. And I mean, spoiler alert, I live from the accident. Yay, I recover. And I do make it back on that softball mound. But I tell that story in service to my audience, because what I want them to know is they can get back on their mound, on their softball mound. No matter what has happened in your life, you have an opportunity to get to the other side of it and get back up and create a whole new life in some cases. And so what this story is doing, it's giving them permission to see what I've been through. Yes. But again, the accident is just a little, speed bump in the story. The real story takes place about my journey back to the mound. How did I do it? Why did I do it? What were the obstacles? What did I overcome? And then that moment where I'm back on the mound for the very first time, and I wind up and I release that pitch for the very first time since the accident. I still get chills, Adam, from reliving that moment. And that's what I want for my audience too. I want them to know that that's possible and that they can take action.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I just think it's what I'm hearing is so important, to where, how you're holding the audience in terms of their sensitivity, and in the journey to, and of course the through line of getting back on the mound, which is so magical, because don't you find it when you're in one place that may be tragic, but then you're in a place where it rises into the courage and the follow through, that little juxtaposition of movement of, my gosh, what happened to, yes, stand up again. Yes, back on. I can do that too.
Exactly.
Kind of thing is really, really powerful. And
it's so powerful. And here's the other piece of this, Adam. When we as storytellers share our stories, we never know who, 100% of the time, we don't know who it affects and how deeply. Just like the person who wrote you didn't know that your story affected her until she wrote to you, right? And so you had no idea. A couple of years ago, I was at a conference and I wasn't speaking. I was just, I enjoying the conference as a bystander. So I'm happy to just learn and take in the information. And the first break happens, so I'm gathering all my stuff around me, and I see this guy coming straight towards me from across the theater, and I'm thinking, I don't know him. Should I know him? Uh-oh. I hate when that happens. It's so awkward. And so he's coming towards me faster and faster. I'm thinking, should I pretend like I know him? What should I say? What do I do? And before I can figure out what to do, he's right here. And so I say what anyone would do. And I say, hi. And he says, Kymberlee, I'm so glad I caught up to you. You don't know this, but I heard your story about the moped versus cement truck accident 3 years ago. And I just want to let you know your story changed my life. And I just want to say thank you. Yeah. And he turned around and walked away. Oh, that's the power of story. That's what it can do. It
feels so good to receive that as a storyteller. Like just even having that little note from Thea, it's like, oh, that just makes it all so worthwhile. Just that little piece. So the reward, the juicy piece of that committed intention of sharing and enlivening and inspiring, because that's what we're really about here. And that receptivity that comes back, right? It's just so exciting. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here with us today, Kymberlee. I've just enjoyed our time immensely.
As have I. Thank you for the invitation, Adam. I really appreciate that.
You and I want to invite everybody, an invitation for everybody to please check out Kymberlee Weil's website. Again, it's storytellingschool.com. And by the way, she's a podcaster too. So she has a lot of really cool guests and nice things to help you in your storytelling. And so today I'm just very grateful to be with you. I'm grateful to be with everybody. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. We certainly are living in extraordinary times. I don't think I need to tell anybody that. We have a lot of fragility of the human heart. We have a lot of great potential in our brands, in our life, in the work that we're doing. Your story matters. Your story matters. And when we get a chance to evolve our story beyond our old stories of our own pains and our own journey, but to bring them to life again, we have the ability to do anything. Everything becomes possible and nothing becomes impossible. So I want to thank you, Kymberlee, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And oh, by the way, I have one last question for you. What is your cure for terminal seriousness?
I think you know this. The answer to that would be improv. That would be improv. And speaking of fear, I started improv because it scared me to death. The thought of, I like to write out my stories, memorize my stories, and this is not only no script in the moment, but it's also, and you're supposed to be funny. So, the idea of improv terrified me. So I tend to do things that terrify me. And I tried it out and took a class from our mutual dear friend, Alan Irwin, who remains my mentor to this day. And it changed my life, quite honestly. Taking these improv classes and then starting to perform in improv. And now I teach improv and I perform. I perform all the time in improv, short form and long form. And it is that cure. I will leave you with this, Adam. In my classes that I run, at the beginning of classes, I also set an intention for the evening and say, okay, whatever, one at a time we go around the room and I say, what would you like to get out of tonight? What's your intention? What would you like to get out of it? And I will tell you these days, speaking to the volatility of our world, so often I hear person after person after person, I just want to laugh. I just want to let go. I just want to be ridiculous. I just want to leave the world out those doors. I just want to get out of my head. Please, that's all I want. I just want to laugh. And so I feel like that's such a gift that I can give to humanity in so many ways, to create this really safe space for people to be ridiculous.
Well, there you have it. Kymberlee Weil's cure for terminal serious. Be ridiculous.
Be ridiculous. Take an improv class.
Take an improv class and terrify yourself. It'll shake it right out of you. And well, thank you again, and wish everyone the best. Until next time, take care and blessings to you.
Thank you, Adam.